Rory McIlroy is not at the Travelers Championship. The final signature event of the 2026 PGA Tour season is happening right now, and the biggest name in golf is watching from home. Not injured, not resting, just absent. His absence landed at the exact same week the tour announced the most sweeping changes in its history, confirmed its new commissioner, and quietly closed the door on the man who ran professional golf for the last decade. All of that happened at the Travelers, without Rory in the building. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you understand what happened between Rory McIlroy and the people running this tour over the last 3 years, and what Rory said publicly just days before this tournament, that word coincidence starts to fall apart very fast. Something broke, and the break runs a lot deeper than a scheduling decision. I think Rory's empty tee slot this week is the loudest thing he has said all year. Do you agree? Drop it below. Subscribe now because this story is moving fast, and there is a lot more coming. To understand where things stand today, you have to understand what this tour meant to Rory McIlroy 3 years ago, because the gap between that version of Rory and the one sitting in London this week tells you everything. When Live Golf launched in 2022 with Saudi money and guaranteed contracts, the PGA Tour needed a human face. Someone credible enough to stand in front of cameras, absorb every difficult question, and make the case that the tour was worth defending. Rory McIlroy became that person, not because anyone forced him, because he believed it. He sat on the policy board. He gave up relationships with players who left for Live. He called them out publicly by name. He took the political heat that tour executives never had to take personally, because Rory was always the one standing at the microphone. That sacrifice was real. The cost was real. What the tour did with that loyalty is the part nobody talks about, and it explains everything happening this week. June 2023. Jay Monahan announced a framework agreement with Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, the exact money behind LIV Golf. The same organization Rory had spent 2 years publicly opposing at significant personal cost. Players found out the same moment the rest of the world did. No warning, no private briefing, no phone call the night before. For most players, that was a political shock. For Rory, it landed differently. He had not just defended this tour, he had made himself the face of defending it. He had damaged friendships over it. He had staked his reputation on the argument that the PGA Tour stood for something the Saudi money could not buy. Monahan did not tell him, not a word. Think about what that means. The player who sacrificed the most publicly for this tour found out about its biggest decision the same way a casual fan scrolling Twitter did. That is not a policy disagreement. That is something personal. A players' meeting followed at the RBC Canadian Open in Toronto. The room was tense. Voices were raised. One player called on Monahan to resign in front of everyone. The locker room was fracturing in real time, and Rory was sitting inside it, processing a betrayal that had happened in public. He stepped back from the policy board. He stopped being the spokesperson. He started building a life outside tour politics, a home outside London, a schedule shaped around what mattered to him rather than what the tour needed. Most people assumed that was the lowest point. It was not even close. When Rory later attempted to return to the board to help repair the damage, he was blocked, not by Monahan, by fellow players. People he had stood beside through the ugliest moments of the Live War reportedly raised concerns about his return. He found out through the same cold process that had already shut him out once before. The man who gave the most to protect this tour got locked out of fixing it by the people he had protected it for. After that, something changed permanently. The fire that drove him into every political battle, every uncomfortable press conference, every public sacrifice, that fire found no reason to keep burning for this cause. The tour felt that absence long before this week. Rolapp arrived as new CEO in 2025 with a mandate to modernize everything. Field sizes dropped. The number of fully exempt tour cards was cut from 125 down to 100, meaning 25 players who previously held guaranteed status suddenly held nothing of the sort. Veterans called it insulting. Major champions called it pathetic. The explanation given was pace of play, and the locker room did not accept it for a single second. Then came the structural overhaul, a 2-tier system effective 2028, splitting the tour into a championship series at the top and a challenger series below, with promotion and relegation deciding everything. The entire competitive identity of professional golf was being redrawn. Those opinions Rory was forming in private were about to go very public. What he said next drew a line nobody inside that building could ignore. Days before the Travelers' tee sheets were finalized, Rory sat in front of cameras at the US Open and delivered a verdict that moved through every locker room within hours. Track 2 is a glorified Korn Ferry event. That is what Track 2 is going to be. Understand the weight behind those words. Rory holds lifetime membership with 30 career wins. Relegation threatens him in no way whatsoever. When a player with zero self-interest calls the tour's new structure a glorified development tour, he is speaking on behalf of 60 players whose entire careers now balance on which tier they land in, with the credibility of someone who has nothing to gain from saying it. He went further. I think, as they have done all this work, you start to realize that the way the tour was before LIV came along was actually pretty good. 3 years, 2 commissioners, 1 framework agreement that produced nothing, and the conclusion from the most recognizable face in professional golf. They broke something that was already working. That is not a policy critique. That is a verdict from the person who paid the highest price watching it break. Rolapp responded at the Travelers this week. He defended the Challenger Series and confirmed the new structure moves forward regardless. He and Rory spoke directly. Rory softened his public tone after the official announcement. Softening a tone is not the same as walking through the door. Rory has played 9 events this season. He skipped 3 signature events, the RBC Heritage, the Cadillac Championship, and now the Travelers. No other player inside the world's top 50 missed this week. Not one. Fans erupted online. Dude does not care about the PGA Tour anymore, and it shows. Another simply said, relegate him. Calls grew for Rory to be ruled ineligible for the FedEx Cup playoffs entirely. Here is what those fans are missing. 30 career wins built a layer of protection inside the tour's own rulebook that the organization cannot remove regardless of how many events he skips. They wrote that protection into their own regulations. He cannot be touched. He knows it. Everyone running the tour knows it too, which transforms his absence into something the rulebook was never designed to handle. Rory was offered every reason to show up this week. He declined, making his position clear that he would not be at the Travelers while the people who had failed him were still reshaping a tour he had personally bled to protect. That is a line drawn in public by the one player powerful enough to draw it without consequences. Monahan did not leave on his own terms. The board moved. The players had lost faith. The framework agreement he built his final years around produced nothing, and the people above him ran out of reasons to keep waiting. His exit was confirmed this week at the Travelers, the same tournament his biggest critic chose not to attend. The reinvention begins in 2028. Rolapp is capable and building something real, but the entire new era is launching without a guarantee that the player who moves the needle more than anyone else will show up consistently. The tour can replace its commissioner. It can redesign its structure. It can rebrand everything. But if it cannot make Rory McIlroy want to be in the building, every announcement made at the Travelers this week lands hollower than the people making them would like to admit. If you think the tour has a Rory problem no restructure can fix, say it below. If you think Rolapp earns that trust back, make the case. Either way, hit subscribe, because the next move in this story is coming sooner than anyone expects.